Hey students, this is a video in section 5.6, solving equations containing decimals. Okay, so for decimals, the easiest way to solve the equation is definitely to use a calculator. It's not like fractions where you can build things to common denominators and that kind of thing. It's actually way easier to just look at each individual operation and do it on a calculator. And any calculator that will handle decimals will work. So that's almost any calculator that you can use. Alright? So I will probably show you a little bit about how to do it without a calculator just so you understand how it works. But you can use calculators as much as you want, so I'd recommend that you use a calculator. Okay, so let's see a few examples. Example, solve each equation. Solve each equation. Okay, problem number 1. X plus 3.9 equals 9.7. X plus 3.9 equals 9.7. So the easiest way to do this is to write it out and then plug it into your calculator. So this 3.9 is what we need to get rid of in order to isolate x on the left side. And what's the opposite of adding 3.9? Subtracting 3.9. So we're actually going to want to subtract 3.9 from both sides. Okay, so if we minus 3.9 from both sides, then it's clear that on the right side, what we need to calculate is 9.7 minus 3.9. And for 9.7 minus 3.9, this one's actually easy enough that you don't even really need a calculator. But a calculator is fine here. You can use one if you want. But like this, remember with decimals, when you're adding or subtracting, you just line up the decimal point. And then here, since 7 is smaller than 9, we have to borrow from this 9. So we borrow from this 9, it becomes an 8. And then we get 17 minus 9, which is 8. Okay, so we have 8 down here. We bring the decimal straight down. Okay, so the decimal goes straight down here. And then 8 minus 3 is 5. Okay, so we actually get 5.8. And this one was easy enough, we didn't really need a calculator. But how would you type it into a calculator? Well, you go to your calculator, you type in, you make sure it's cleared up, and then you do 9.7, type in 9.7 minus 3.9, enter, or equals, that gives us 5.8. Same thing. So 5.8 is actually going to be our answer, because the 3.9s are gone now. These just canceled out. Okay, so we actually get x equals 5.8. So that's a very basic decimal equation problem. Hopefully not too bad. Okay, and we're going to be doing the basic ones first, and then on the later ones it'll be easier to use a calculator. But for the basic ones, I wanted to show you the slower way of doing it, which is by hand. Just so that you can understand how the math works. Okay, so problem number 2. Negative 8y equals 4.56. Negative 8y equals 4.56. So, to do this problem, obviously we need to isolate the variable, which is y. And how do we get rid of negative 8? Well, this is negative 8 times y. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 8 is dividing by negative 8. So since this is negative 8 times y, to get rid of the negative 8, we have to divide both sides of the equation by negative 8. Okay, so we're going to divide both sides by negative 8. So on the left side, we just get y. And then on the right side, we have to do 4.56 divided by negative 8. Now, you don't have to do these by hand, but I am going to go ahead and do a couple more of these by hand just to make sure you know how to do it in case you're curious about how that works. Okay, so if we do 4.56 divided by 8, we can write it like this. You just bring the decimal straight up, so it goes up here. And then 8 does not go into 4, so we put a 0 there to the left of the decimal. And then 8 goes into 45. Well, we know 8 times 5 is 40, so we put a 5 here, and we get 45 minus 40. 45 minus 40 is 5. We bring down the 6. And we know that 8 goes into 56 7 times. 8 times 7 is 56. So we have 56 minus 56 is 0. Okay? So that's really not too bad to do by hand. It's just like dividing regular integers. It's just you have the decimal and you bring it straight up. Okay? So we get 0.57, but remember there was a minus here. So whatever answer we get there has to be negative. So it's actually going to be negative 0.57. Okay, so negative 0.57 is our answer. All right? So hopefully that's not too bad. Okay? So number three. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. For number 2, we could have used a calculator. How would we type this into the calculator? We would have typed in 4.56 divided by 8. So if I do 4.56 divided by 8, that gives us the same answer. Still gives us 0.57, but it's negative because there was a negative 8 on the bottom. So it's negative 0.57. So it's even easier on a calculator. Okay, problem number 3. 3.5x equals negative 29.75. 3.5x equals negative 29.75. So to isolate x here, we have to get rid of the 3.5. And this means 3.5 times x. So the opposite of multiplying by 3.5 is dividing by 3.5. So we actually need to divide both sides by 3.5. So on the left side, we're just left with x. And then on the right side, I will do this one by hand, and then I'll also show you on a calculator. It'll be much quicker. So by hand, we would be doing 29.75 divided by 3.5. And the only reason I wanted to show you this one by hand is just in case you don't know how to divide decimals by hand. So the way it works is this number that you're dividing by is called the divisor. And for the divisor, you have to move your decimal all the way to the right. And then you have to count how many places you moved it to the right and move this decimal the same number of places to the right. Okay? So this 3.5, I need to move this decimal all the way to the right, and I count how many places I moved it. Well, I moved it one place to the right, which means I need to also move this decimal one place to the right. Okay, so this one also goes one place to the right. And then that's where our new decimal is. And then, like I said before, you bring the decimal straight up. So our decimal is going to be right up here. Okay? And that's the only part that's different from the other problem. So for the rest of it, we ask ourselves, how many times does 35 go into 29? Well, 0. How about 35 into 297? Well, I'm not sure, but I would say 35 times 2 is 70, and 7 times 4 is 28. So I would say about 8, somewhere around 8. Okay, so I'm going to try 8. So let's put 8 here. Then 8 times 5 is 40. carry the 4. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 4 is 28, so we have 280. So it looks like I was about right. Not about right, I was right. Okay, so now we're going to do 297 minus 280. So 7 minus 0 is 7. 9 minus 8 is 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. So we get 17 down there. And then we want to bring the 5 straight down. Okay, and then we ask ourselves, how many times does 35 go into 175? Well, I don't know. 2 times 35 is 70. And 7 goes into 17 2 times. So I'm going to say about 4. Or would it be 5? Actually, I think it'll be 5. So let's try 5. Okay, so 5 times 5 is 25. Carry the 2. 5 times 3 is 15. Plus 2 is 17. Yeah, so it was 5. So we get 175 minus 175, which is 0. Okay, so we know that we're done dividing. But notice this one took a lot more work. And but we did get to our answer. Our answer is going to be negative, because there's a minus here, 8.5. Negative 8.5. But as you can see, already we wasted a lot of time on this problem trying to do the division by hand, when we could have much more easily just typed it into a calculator. So we could do 29.75 divided by 3.5. And that gives us 8.5 almost instantly. So that's way faster. Okay? But it's good to know how to do it by hand so that we understand the math behind it. Alright, so we're good with that one. Okay, so let's take a look at problem number 4. Now pretty soon here I'm just going to be switching to a calculator, but for problem number 4, just one more time, I'm going to show you how to do it by hand. But it's going to start getting where the problems are so long that it's kind of tedious and time consuming to do it by hand. So in general, you're probably going to want to use a calculator. It's just nice to know how to do the math. Okay, so for number 4, we have negative 3.2x plus 2.3 equals negative 13.7. Okay, negative 3.2x plus 2.3 equals negative 13.7. So there's a number of ways of doing this by hand, but I'm just going to do it where we isolate the variable by first getting rid of the 2.3. Okay, so what's the opposite of adding 2.3? Subtracting 2.3. So to get rid of the 2.3 on the left side, we're going to minus 2.3 from both sides. Okay? So on the left side, we just have negative 3.2x. And then on the right side, because these are both negative, we keep the sign and we add. So here we're actually adding, but our answer is going to be negative. Because they're the same sign, you keep the sign and add. Okay, so 7 plus 3 is 10. Carry the 1. Bring the decimal straight down. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 2 is 6. And then 1 plus 0 is 1. So we actually get 16.0, but it's negative because we keep the sign. So it's negative 16.0. Alright? And then we still aren't done though. We still have to isolate x. So the next thing we have to get rid of is the negative 3.2. So only way to get rid of that is to divide both sides by negative 3.2. So I'm going to divide both sides of the equation by negative 3.2. On the left side, the negatives and the 3.2's cancel. And we just get x. And then on the right side, the negatives cancel. And then 16 divided by 3.2, I think we know how to do that by hand now, so let's start using the calculator. So 16 divided by 3.2 is 5. See how much faster that was? Just typing it in. Okay, so we actually get x equals 5. Okay? So 5 is our answer. And from this point on, I'm primarily going to be using the calculator just because it's quicker and just more efficient. Okay, but because I'm going to be doing some harder problems, it's going to make sense to use the calculator, because otherwise these next few problems that I'm doing would take a long time to do by hand. So that's why I'm switching to the calculator. Okay, so for problem number 5, we have a lot of decimals. We have negative 0.5x plus 8.75 equals negative 0.3x plus 9.35. Okay, so negative 0.5x plus 8.75 equals negative 0.3x plus 9.35. So this one has a lot of decimals. So this is why I recommend a calculator. So what you have to do here is, first of all, notice there's an x on both sides. So we're going to have to get rid of one of those x's because we want to have just x on one side. And like I've said before, it's generally easier to get rid of whatever coefficient is smaller. Okay, so negative 0.5x is smaller than negative 0.3x because they're negative. This one's smaller. So the one I'm going to get rid of is the smaller one. So I'm getting rid of the negative 0.5x. So if I add 0.5x to both sides, that's going to be my first step. That's getting rid of the x on the left side. Okay, so after I do that, on the left side, all I have is 8.75. And then on the right side, negative 0.3 plus 0.5. Some of you might be able to do that in your head. That's really just 5 minus 3, which is 2. So that's actually 0.2x. Or you can just use your calculator. It's 0.5 minus 0.3. So you can type it in, 0.5 minus 0.3. And that gives you 0.2. Okay, but it's 0.2x because we're actually combining like terms. We're combining the x's. So we should have 8.75 equals 0.2x plus 9.35. Okay, and then our next step is we're trying to isolate x, so we're going to have to do our addition and subtraction before our multiplication and division when you're solving an equation. So we want to get rid of the positive 9.35. So how do we do that? Well, the opposite of adding 9.35 is subtracting it. So we want to subtract 9.35 from both sides of the equation. And on the left side, if we were to do it by hand, it would be a little bit tricky because the larger number is negative, so the answer has to be negative. And then we would have to subtract. But in order to subtract, we'd have to switch the order. I guess it wouldn't be that bad, but let's use our calculator. So 8.75 minus 9.35. 8.75 minus 9.35. That gives us negative 0.6. Okay, so on the left side, we now have negative 0.6 equals 0.2x. Okay? And then for our last step, we need to isolate x on the right side. So how do we do that? Well, to get rid of the 0.2, we need to divide both sides by 0.2. Okay, divide both sides by 0.2. So on the right side, the 0.2's cancel out. On the left side, if you look at it, the decimals cancel out, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. But if you can't do that in your head, you can just type it in quickly. So you can do 0.6 divided by 0.2, and that gives you 3. But notice there's a minus here, so it's actually going to give us negative 3. Okay, so on the left side we now have negative 3, and on the right side we just have x. So we've isolated the variable. So negative 3 is our answer. Okay, so I wanted to do one more of the challenging problems. Well, I guess they aren't that challenging because we have a calculator. But number 6 is 4 times the quantity 4x minus 1.4 equals 5x minus 5.6. Okay, so 4 times the quantity 4x minus 1.4 equals 5x minus 5.6. So you treat these just as if they didn't have decimals, and you perform all the same steps that you would normally do when you're solving an equation. So like here, our first step is going to be to distribute the 4. Okay, so we're going to start by distributing the 4 on the left side. So we have 4 times 4x is 16x, and then we have 4 times negative 1.4. What's 4 times negative 1.4? Calculator's the best. So 4 times 1.4 gives you 5.6. But there's a minus there, so it's going to be minus 5.6. So we have 16x minus 5.6 equals 5x minus 5.6. Okay? And then because we have a variable on both sides, remember we have to get rid of one of the variables. So we either have to get rid of the 5x or the 16x. And I say get rid of whichever one has a smaller coefficient. So here 5x is a smaller coefficient than 16x. So we're going to get rid of the 5x. How do you get rid of positive 5x? You subtract 5x from both sides. Okay, so in this next step we're going to be minusing. We're going to minus 5x from both sides. So on the left side, 16x minus 5x is 11x. So we have 11x minus 5.6 equals, on the right side, 5x minus 5x is 0. And then we have a negative 5.6. Okay, so you should have 11x minus 5.6 equals negative 5.6. Okay? And then what else do we have to do here? Well, we have to isolate x on the left side. So the next thing in our way is this negative 5.6 right here. So to get rid of that one, we need to add 5.6 to both sides. So if we add 5.6 to both sides, then something interesting happens. On the left side, the 5.6 is canceled. On the right side, 5.6 minus 5.6 is also 0. So on the right side, because we have nothing over there, we have to write 0. Okay, so our new equation now is 11x equals 0. Okay, that doesn't happen a lot, but it happened in this problem. Okay, and then to finish isolating x, we need to get rid of the 11. And since it's 11x, that means 11 times x. So the reverse of multiplying by 11 is dividing by 11. So we're going to divide both sides by 11. Okay, and that gets rid of the 11 on the left side. So we get x equals 0 divided by 11. Remember that 0 divided by any non-zero number is 0. So our answer is x equals 0. Okay? And I think with that, I think we are good. I think you've seen pretty much all the cases. Thanks for watching.